Hello and welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman, and I'm joined by my partner, Tyrone, the Porcupine Hobo. How you doing, my man?
Oh man, I'm doing good because I just got back from Home Depot, and I got my grindstone for my axe because I got an axe to grind.
Oh, lordy. I'm not going to say that wasn't worth it. I'm not going to say it was. I'm just going to leave it sit there and let the audience decide. All right, you got an axe to grind. This is going to
Yeah.
be a fun episode for me anyway because I have no idea what's going on. Um, Tyrone, what are we talking about today?
Yeah. So, we have this thing where we like to comment sometimes on things our libertarian heroes say and do. Sometimes we have a segment we call "Hey Hero, your fly is down" when we think they kind of made an egregious error. But this isn't a segment; this is a whole episode. Uh,
Exciting.
and we're going to talk about a recent email newsletter from the great Tom Woods, obviously libertarian hero to both of us. In fact, you were just on his cruise.
That's right.
So this could be a little feisty, folks. I haven't really given Adam a whole lot of preparation for this because I kind of want to get his guttural reaction to this. And I think he and I might be on slightly different sides of the fence on this. So it could be for interesting debate between us as well. And so Tom Wood sent out this email newsletter, like I said, a while ago. It's from his April 28th newsletter. And there was something in it that I wanted to react to. So I'm going to just read the newsletter as the starting point, and then hopefully this makes sense. You see where I'm going, and then we'll just have kind of a conversation about it. So, and it's a short newsletter. I'll just read it in its entirety.
Not to worry, Tom. I got your back.
Hey, and shout out to Tom Woods. He was the one that I've been listening to his show from almost the beginning. So what, 12 years or more, and it was really he was the one that really convinced me to go from minarchism to anarchism. Right.
Cool.
So owe him a lot of my ideological thought, but I think. In this one newsletter, I think there's a point where I've got an axe to grind. Maybe it's a small axe, but we'll see. We'll see.
You must have bought a small, teeny tiny grindstone.
Right. All right. So the article or the newsletter simply reads: Today I was reading an item about education in Chicago. You already know this is going to be ugly, and before I knew it, I was interrogating Grok 3, the Twitter AI. The item read as follows. Chicago's teachers insisted that higher pay would unlock student success. The city obliged, hiking per-student spending by 70% and boosting average teacher salaries to $100,000. The result? Failure on a grander scale. Today, just 11% of black students in Chicago are proficient in reading, a tragic monument to the bankrupt promise of a broken system. So that was the item he came across. And then his newsletter continues on. And Tom says, I went to Grok and asked it about the current disparity between black and white educational achievement pre-college. Its answer was, of course, replete with the usual buzzwords meant to explain the disparity away. Quote, local conditions, poverty, and systemic inequities, unquote. Then ensued a lengthy exchange between the robot and me. At the end, I asked, of course, slavery is a terrible injustice, but how many years will have to pass since the end of slavery before it can no longer be legitimately cited as an explanation for current problems? I asked for a specific number. To my surprise, Grok 3 gave me a specific number, 250. Once 250 years have passed, then slavery-based arguments are going to start being implausible. Here's what it said, and believe me, it gave a lengthy analysis justifying its choice of this number. And then there's he cut out an image of the Grok response. And it says, a number, 250 years post-slavery, 2115 CE. I'll set a timeline of 250 years from the end of slavery, 1865, or 2115 CE, as the point when slavery's legacy should no longer be a valid primary explanation for disparities, assuming current trends and interventions continue. This is 160 years from now. 2025 plus 160 equals 2115, or 290 years total since 1865. Below, I'll justify this. And then Tom doesn't show the rest of the conversation, just cuts it off there. I think that's probably the important part Tom wanted to show. And then Tom continues in the newsletter saying, so to anyone being born this year, if you can hang on until age 90, you'll perhaps be able to have an adult conversation then. All right. So that's Tom Wood's newsletter. Now, the thing I have issue with, and where I'm going to start to grind the axe a little bit, is he seems to just dismiss this out of hand as if this is absurd prima facie, just absurd on its face. Like we shouldn't even consider it. And I think at times what rubs me a little bit the wrong way sometimes with some of the times way Tom writes or speaks is he can come off a little condescending, I think. And I don't think this should just be dismissed as an idea. In fact, Adam, we recently recorded an episode of our show talking about the awesome song from the 80s, I Ain't Gonna Play Sun City with Little Steven. You remember that episode and that great song?
We're not going to play that song again, are we?
No, we're not going to play that song again. But Tom's newsletter came out April 28th. Now, our episode on the Sun City didn't publish on YouTube until May 5th. But folks, I'm sure you're aware, we record those episodes in advance. So you'll just have to take my word from me that we recorded that episode actually on April 5th, so well before Tom's newsletter came out. So, Adam, go ahead and play the Sun City clip from our episode, please.
I will do that. May I make a few comments about the newsletter article first?
Sure.
First thing is, it's interesting that the thing that germinated this article is a stat from a government school. And government schools are poison. And, we jump straight to racism as an explanatory whatever. And I'm curious that we just glossed right over that fact. I'm curious whether I didn't know, first of all, that they broke down educational achievement into racial categories. I guess I'm just naive that way. But I'm wondering if the schools in question are crappy, what is the percentage of white students in these schools or Hispanic or whatever? Are they having the same literacy rate problems or educational problems? I'm just curious. And then my second reaction is 250, huh? Computer, not 249 and not 251 or 250.5. And we're taking the end of the Civil War or the passage of the 14th Amendment and ignoring Jim Crow and Reconstruction and all the other various things, the passage of the Civil Rights Act. It's really weird. Like to know how you calculated that. Those are my immediate comments right off the cuff.
All right.
Let's hear from what a couple geniuses said, or one genius at least, in this former episode of ours, the Sun City one. All right, you ready?
Another main point that people seem to focus on in these debates, and we're going to link to a debate recently that Dave Smith did at Princeton on this topic. A lot of these arguments hinge on this. It's the Jewish ancestral homeland, and they have a right to that land in that area, and the state of Israel has a right to exist. And in that debate, the pro Israel person, I guess. I don't necessarily want to call Dave Smith an anti-Israel person because I don't think he would say Israel doesn't have a right to exist any more than the
Sure, he
United
wouldn't.
States doesn't have
Yeah.
a right to exist, even though you could make an argument that perhaps the Native Americans should get all the land back or something like that, right? You can have these arguments, and they all come down to sort of a who was here first type of situation, and it all comes down to because 2,000 years ago there was this nation of Israel, therefore, even though there hasn't been a Israel nation for thousands of years, they have a right to this land. And so what I think is the problem with that is how far do you want to go back, right? So I think there has to be a statute of limitations on things, right? I mean, now I'd be curious to hear somebody like Dominic Scarcella or Bob Murphy kind of pondered this question because Walter Block uses this analogy that if your great-grandfather was a Nazi and he took a watch from this other person's great-grandfather who was a Jew, and you could trace that lineage back to ownership of the watch, Walter Block says the descendant who now is in possession of the watch should give the watch over to the descendant of the Jewish man because you can trace back the property ownership. So I think what Walter Block is saying, as long as you can sort of trace back actual
Property
individual
titles.
specific lineages, that gets very difficult to do once you get past a certain number of years. Like if you want to go back 2,000 years and say the Jewish people were there 2,000 years ago and had a state, therefore they have a right to it today. Well, what if we go back 3,000 years or 10,000 years or 100,000 years? And the reason why I brought up Bob Murphy and Dominic Scarcella because they're very religious people. So I don't know if they think the earth is only 6,000 years old. God created it, and therefore we can trace it back. Like the Bible is a good record of, that lineage or whatever. But if it's me, I think we are 200,000 years old as a species, and trying to trace back who was there first is impossible. So you get to this point where you have to say there's a statute of limitations. And in my mind, I think about 200 years. I mean, I could be talked into 150 or 250. Like, there's reasonable, but it can't be much more than that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? That was a bit of a jumble mess.
I'm not sure about statute of limitations. I'm tempted by it just because the further back you go, the harder it gets to prove clear title to property, the more messy it gets. And you also have a problem with land specifically, because what do you do about the improvements that were added onto the land over the course of several decades or millennia? I think Walter Block makes an interesting claim that if you can prove title, everybody should be made whole in the transactions all the way up to the present day. I'm sympathetic to that.
Boom! I agree with Grok. The smartest artificial intelligence in the world. Well, I had it all along. I had it all along. Right there.
So this whole episode is so that you can get a computer to justify your 200-year number. Okay.
It was a little surreal and sort of out of body experience watching us,
right?
Our previous shows.
Oh, as soon as the clip started playing, I was just so relieved. I'm wearing a different shirt.
So I guess my axe to grind is like, I think there's something to that though. I don't think like I think Tom sometimes just perhaps maybe I don't know the right words. I was gonna say something like too intellectual or too logical or something like that, and he derides anyone that has sort of this feeling like, well, enough time hasn't passed yet enough as being childish, that we're not having an adult conversation. But really, as human beings, we have a memory. Like things that happened in the past matter. And yeah, I don't want to say that the sins of the father transfer to the sins of the son, but I don't know. It seems to me like there's got to be some of that. So like some of the societies that I've experienced living in, like I lived in Japan for a couple of years. This is a very honor bound society, right? It's very honor focused, and so much so that if I commit a crime, it reflects poorly not just on me, but my entire family. It brings shame to the family, and that has real world consequences, such as you might not get hired for a job. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't commit the crime, but if your father murdered somebody, how does that reflect on you and your whole family? And what's your character like if your father could do something like that? And these societies that have this honor-based system, you could be a young lady walking at 3 a.m. alone in the middle of a back alley street in Tokyo and never worry about getting raped or robbed or murdered, because Tokyo is just that safe, and it has nothing to do with the laws. It has to do with the culture and this honor system. And so I think that matters, and I think that's something our society lost. I think that's sort of an American tragedy, that when the first colonists left Europe, they kind of just like left it all behind. And in a way, like, I can do anything in America and it's not going to affect my family back home because we're separated by an ocean. And so I think we lost sort of that, like, uh, honor bound morality, if you want to call it that. So yeah, to me, you know what? Bad things happen in the past. And yes, I'm not directly responsible for them, but I think I can acknowledge that certain parts of the population have been hurt by them, and that gets carried on generation to generation. And just to dismiss it that way, like we're not having an adult conversation. I think eventually enough time passes, time heals all wounds, but I don't think enough time has passed yet. I really don't. So when I pulled 200 years out of my ass, okay, fine. It was just a number I'm pulling out of my ass. And like you said, you're not necessarily in favor of statute limitations. You'd rather be able to prove the long chain of things. But 1,000 years from now, nobody's going to care about this stuff. But today, we still care about it. So, all right, Adam, let loose.
Yeah, I have several things to respond to. First is I'm somewhat attracted to an honor-bound culture. Not entirely, but there are aspects of it that I resonate with me. And it's interesting that the place in America where people who felt that way settled was the American South. They maintained that honor tradition for a lot longer than in the North traditionally, for whatever that means. Second thing is, it is not fair one bit for me to speak for Tom Woods. Nevertheless, I'll take a shot at it. I think his point is not that the pain and evil of slavery doesn't have lasting impacts across the generations. I think he's saying that there are other better explanations for this segment of our populace to not be doing well. I would point to government schools right away, because I think that's an evil that can't be glossed over. But I'm sure he would probably say there's something the matter with the culture by which education is not considered a value and other things are. But I also think that part of what makes slavery and the history of it so destructive is the modern teaching of it encourages a victim mentality that is very antithetical to human flourishing. If you think of yourself as an oppressed person, that something is owed to you, and you're living in a system that's governed by people who don't have your best interests at heart and it's rigged against you and it's not fair, why bother trying to succeed? Why bother to learn anything in the white man's schools if you're just a victim of such schools? I think there's something really, really negative about that mindset, and it's a shame that we teach that. Oppressor versus oppressed is not a healthy relationship for anybody, and that shouldn't be continued into the future. So I suspect he's probably pointing to things like that it's unhealthy to think about things this way, that there's a cultural aspect, and that's not necessarily the history of slavery. Might have had a part of the explanation for that, but it's certainly not the entire explanation. Rap culture, I don't think you can put at the lay at the feet of Southern slaveholders long, long ago. So again, it's not fair for me to try to speak for Tom, but I imagine he's pushing back against this obvious it's racism explanation for poor educational achievement by black people.
Yeah, fair enough. I just wanted to use that as kind of a starting launching point for a broader discussion. I'm trying to gently turn us into the topic of reparations here.
Okay.
So why not? Because we don't shy away from hot button issues. We've already been canceled from every platform. Only my mother in her basement's watching this. So I mean, we got nothing to lose, right, Adam?
My wife watches sometimes.
I can't even get my wife to watch it. So, so anyway, are you a fan of the show Atlanta? Have you ever watched this?
I am aware of its existence. I have yet to watch a single episode.
Okay, well, the show is done. They wrapped up the last season last year or maybe a couple of years ago, something like that. And this is Donald Glover's project. A lot of people may know him from Community. He played Troy and Abed in the morning. I don't know if you ever watched Community. But Donald Glover's an excellent actor, writer.
Is this the show from which we know the famous Juicy Smollier?
I don't know what that is.
That's because I'm butchering his name like Dave Chappelle did, but Jesse Smollett or something, the guy who said came up with that these two MAGA guys attacked me as I was leaving a subway at 2:00 in the morning in Chicago. This was a big thing, Tyrone. You're not aware of this?
I know that, but I don't know how that relates to the show Atlanta.
He's a star from Atlanta, isn't he?
No.
He's not?
No.
Oh. What show is he on? What
Adam, not all black people look alike.
Is it Empire?
Empire.
Is it Empire? I don't watch that show either. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Juicy.
I'm sorry. All right. Well, folks, this is what you get. No. And then he also has a rap career. He goes under the name Childish Gambino as his rap name. Anyway, Atlanta was his personal project, and I consider it to be one of the best shows ever made. I think it's phenomenal. You know, the number one show ever made is The Wire. There's no arguing it. Period. There's no debate. It's The Wire. End of story. Atlanta's up there. It's a top 10 show. Anyway, the way the final season, there was an episode that sort of tongue-in-cheek comically handled the topic of reparations.
Okay.
And it was a clever twist on it. So why don't you just play the first clip there, which is just the trailer for the episode.
You got it. Here it comes.
What is this about?
Your family owned my great-great-grandmother and father for 12 years. You owe me money.
They can look you up and force you to pay.
This concerns all of us, Willie.
No, don't ask.
All right, that's the entire clip. So the premise of this episode is reparations is happening, and they determined that if you were the descendant of a slave owner, you've got to pay reparations, right? Like they figured it all out. They figured out the lineage, the chain of whatever, and hand certain people a bill. And so like the white people are all nervous, and like one person gets a letter saying you were not the descendant. They're like, all right, and then the other person is like, oh no, my life is ruined, and it has kind of a really sweet ending to it. And I don't want to give it away since you haven't seen the show. I would again recommend watching it, but there's one scene in the episode that kind of makes an interesting point. So why don't you play that clip?
Okay, here it comes.
We were treating slavery as if it were a mystery buried in the past, something to investigate if we chose to. But now that history has a monetary value. Confession is not absolution. And in the case of this person, what's her name?
Shaniqua.
to Shaniqua, to them. Slavery is not past. It is not a mystery. It is not an historical curiosity. It is a cruel, unavoidable ghost that haunts in a way we can't see. None of us are perfect. So now you're separated from your wife. She's taking your kid. Now she has to be raised without a father. She has to build wealth and success from the ground up, right? Similar to the position we put them in. We're gonna be okay. Your daughter's gonna be okay. The curse is lifted from her. All of us. We were running from it. Now we're free. Excuse me.
So they'll show it there. But
That
he
poor
goes
guy's
outside.
face.
He goes outside and blows his brains out.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. We're free of it. We're free.
All right. So anyway, I think I think it's important. You agree or disagree. Understand the perspective. I think at least. And I think that perspective should just be dismissed out of hand. Whether you or I would completely agree with it or not. So that's one perspective coming from, I'll say Donald Glover being, let's just say, a representative of the black community from that perspective. And then, I personally like Maj Toure a lot. Do you like Maj?
Quite a
do you have
bit.
mixed feelings about him? Okay. So Maj, for those of you who don't know, is another black man, considers himself a libertarian, and he started the Black Guns Matter movement. So he's a big Second Amendment guy, trying to go in and teach to the black community, why guns are important, why the right to own a gun is especially important for the black community, and does a lot of work on that front.
And he importantly teaches responsible firearms training, ownership, and conflict de-escalation. I mean, it's not
Right.
just like everybody gets strapped, He's teaching
Yeah.
a very important thing about responsibility and self-defense, and not increasing the amount of violence we have in our society, but decreasing it by gun ownership. And amen.
And he spoke at the Libertarian Party of Minnesota's convention a couple of years ago. And he gave, part of his speech was about reparations. And, I think the default position for libertarians is no, reparations. We can't go down that road. Too much time has passed. Sins of the father don't pass the sins of the son. And Maj Toure had a bit of a different perspective on that. So what I've got is a clip from another podcast that he did. This show is called Dave versus Goliath, where he was a guest on that. So this is a little bit of a long clip, but I think gives his perspective. And then I think, Adam, after we watch that, maybe we can wrap it up by just comparing the two perspectives, or giving our final thoughts on it, or just saying, hey, we're two old white guys, so if we give up and Quinn don't have a comment. But anyway, play that other clip.
As long as I don't have to blow my brains out at the end, or have my face look like that poor other guy in the conversation. Oh my. All right, here we go with Maj.
Reparations. Everybody that watches Game of Thrones, everybody was like, Khaleesi's the rightful ruler. Her brother was an absolute piece of shit. As the story progresses, you recognize, oh shit, Jon Snow's actually the rightful ruler. If you understand this concept of things were going one way, a group of people or a person or family member was wronged, and then property, stuff, and the lineage was broken, and that group of people needs to be made whole again, you fully understand the concept of reparations. I want to clarify because there's this straw man argument that I'm advocating for because I'm black and because y'all are white, y'all owe me $20 each. That's fucking retarded. We don't even got to go far back as slavery. We can talk about segregation. We can talk about land grants being removed. We can talk about after so-called emancipation, where the federal government says, okay, we fucked this group of people up. We fucked them up.
We owe you this. And
we'll
decided
give you
what
40
right.
acres and a mule. That was reparations.
Yep.
The United States government said, psych.
Default.
That's
contracts.
Not
Libertarians love contracts.
Right. It was like, here's a contract, and then fucking Allen Iverson crossed you over like, fuck no. Pump faked you. When you tie land and home ownership and equity over time, you're talking about continuing after the government said we were wrong, we fucked this group of people up. You're continuing that. And I'm not talking about these tap dancing ass motherfuckers, that just Johnny come lately, like cut the check and just saying it with no practical fucking application. There are people that have done work. Before Johnny Cochran died, he had this thing called the Reparations Assessment Group, where he was literally going to target the federal government and the corporations. Corporate charters exist beyond individuals. Wells Fargo, Norfolk Southern, insurance companies that benefited and still have maintained a profit from the captivity of African-American people. We have to acknowledge this, bro. The quicker we acknowledge this, the quicker race relations will get better in America. And if you're talking about this as a libertarian from a property rights, there was a family in California like last year that proved that the California government took their fucking great whatever's home. It was fucking beachfront property in LA. They had to give it back. So if you're talking about property rights as a libertarian, you're talking about the state violating people, which also, by the way, included murder from a libertarian perspective. We cannot pretend that there should be a statute of limitations on death, rape, pillage, property violations. And as a people that were looked at as property, I'll give you even this. You know the motherfuckers that lost their property, that owned humans, because it was not all white people in America. It wasn't. The people that owned humans after emancipation, do you know the government gave some of that land that was earmarked for those black people to the fucking captive owners? If a motherfucker like me knows that and is articulating it in a way that's not saying, yeah, you guys both, since you're white, you owe me money, because no one ever fucking says that other than TV. If I can articulate this position this way, there is no way that somebody can't go, nah, because maybe it could be the tax conversation. I don't think there should be any taxes, right? We have to look for things that are going to heal. And if we want to heal, the best apology is change behavior and fixing the situation. So I think that conversation around, and again, I'm not the subject matter expert. I have done some study on it, and I know way more thoroughly involved and more intelligent people in that lane. But I think it's a conversation to have. And I think it does not, it's not in opposition to a libertarian position. If I was saying, just fire up the money printers and just give the money to black people for being black, as if there was not all of these things that we just discussed there, then I could agree with some of those guys that were giving me more pushback. But that's not what I said, meant, or implied, and they should like actually listen to what I'm saying.
Government does have a wicked crossover dribble, no doubt about it.
Yeah, so I think the common theme for both Maj and Donald Glover is that this sentiment exists, and it hasn't been healed. And, a lot of times libertarians will say, we got to stop kicking the can down the road. We're talking about fiscal responsibility and things like that. But if we stop kicking the can down the road, that means today you and I have got to pay for the screwed up financial mess that our ancestors made, and now we're just gonna be the ones that have to pay for it. We didn't screw it up, but I guess we're not going to kick the can down the road, and now we've got to pay for it. So in a way, they're kind of saying the same thing. It's like, look, let's just stop kicking the can down the road. Let's just fix this thing once and for all. Let's just take some medicine. Even if you and I weren't directly responsible for it, some generation at some point has to do something about it, whether they were ultimately responsible or not, or you just let the clock run out 250 years and hope it kind of goes away. But what I really like about Maj's point is that corporations, unlike people do continue on year after year and sort of have a lineage of descendants. And you and I are no fans of these big corporations colluding with government like they do. So I say, yeah, screw the corporations, make them pay the reparations or do something, figure something out. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I thought it was interesting perspectives. And I thought it was a good talking point for a conversation. So I don't really have much more to contribute. I'm sure you've got a bunch of closing thoughts that will enlighten all of us better.
I don't know how much illumination I have. I do think that since corporations are eternal, you've got, if you have a property rights claim against them, you can definitely claw that back or make a tort or legal action or whatever. It disturbed me that Maj just blithely went between the concept of corporation and government as though they were the same thing, and they're not. Corporation has shareholders, and they're on the hook for the assets and liabilities of the corporation, including ones that occurred in the past. Government's different. All taxpayers are sort of on the hook. All people forced to use the fiat dollar are sort of on the hook for government liability, so that's a lot more messy. I would like to see harms of the past redressed where possible. And as you alluded to, there's probably a statute of limitations concept that's appropriate there. Things that were stolen more recently are easier to return than older things. I just think as you go back into antiquity, this is just going to get messy. Mm-hmm. And suppose you did do as Atlanta did and come up with some calculation that somehow everybody agreed with, and you cut the checks and you passed them out. I don't believe that solves the culture of victimhood and the sense that I've been oppressed and I have not been made whole. Right. I think people will still hold a grudge because they've been educated to hold a grudge.
I think that's right.
So how is the rift healed?
Right.
I mean, maybe Atlanta, maybe I should go watch that show, because the fact that redhead gave that speech with tears in his eyes, drinking a scotch, went outside and blew his brains out, I think is instructive. I'm glad they put that scene in. This isn't going to heal all wounds, obviously. I guess I have one more horrible thing to add.
Sure.
There is an argument made out there by people that I do not hold, ladies and gentlemen, but that if you're talking about the crime of taking people away from their homeland in Africa and bringing them here and forcing them to work, the proper remedy is to make them whole. And that would mean taking them back to Africa and then giving them some compensation for pain and suffering, or whatever. And that could apply to descendants, I suppose, in some legal theory.
What are you, Abraham Lincoln?
Yeah, right. And the people who make that argument, and it's not me, do the calculations of relative wealth of various countries and say these people owe us money.
Right.
I am not making that argument. I think that's insane, but it just does go to show that making a person whole for the sins of the ancient past is really, really difficult.
Yeah, it is.
And I do think we have systemic problems that make it really, really bad for people. And these government schools are a huge part of the problem. If I'm a little black kid born in some inner city and the government is here to help me and educate me, I don't think I have any chance. And my heart breaks for people in that situation. But I don't think reparations fixes that. I think you've got to get
but
the wretched government out of the way and get people into a much more healthy mindset with all this oppression just cleared out. And again, a victim mentality will only hold you down.
I think it could be part of the solution, but again, like you said, if you're just cutting a check, it's not going to solve anything. There's has to be a cultural shift component to it as well. And I don't know, man. Maybe it's a hopeless cause, but it's interesting to think about, and I don't think it's a topic that we should shy away from. And by the way, folks, if you didn't get my little reference about Abraham Lincoln, look up the history of the country of Liberia. All right. Well, Adam, that was fun, I guess. Tom Woods hates me now, although he never knew me. So
I don't think Tom hates you. And he probably would think that a lot of your points have merit. I certainly do. But yeah, cutting a check ain't going to fix this. I mean, Maj just sort of briefly throwed it out there, but like tax exempt status. I mean, hey, I think everybody should have tax exempt status. That doesn't break my heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I'd vote for it either, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a messed up government controlled system, and
Right.
there's no easy answers.
Yep.
All right, Taiwan, this was fun. Thank you for bringing that to us. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening or watching to Human Nature. Check out the show notes. I can't imagine what we're going to put in there. Oh, the link to the Sun City episode. And
Why
we'll link to Tom's, at least the text of Tom's email. And come visit us at hamannature.com for our Substack where I write articles. That's HAMAN nature.com. And we will see y'all next time.